Okay, here we go. So Grishuk was white, Rothstein was black. Okay, so he started on f3, d5, g3, c6, bishop g2, bishop f5. So black is playing a very solid system, where he kind of just wants to put his pawns on these squares, and his bishop is outside the pawn chain. And white's kind of playing it ready. So white plays c4. And here black decides to take on c4. Not the most common response, but certainly possible. Okay, so knight a3 was played. And after knight a3, attacking the c4 pawn, black played the move e5. So already it's a little wonky. So can someone tell me why knight takes e5 is bad? It looks like it's a free pawn. So why is that move bad? So after knight takes e5, unfortunately, get a couple of pieces that are loose. And after knight takes e5, black has bishop takes a3, b takes a3, and now these pieces are both undefended. And there's a move we can do to attack both of them simultaneously. Not queen f6, because I could just defend the knight, but queen to d4. Now I'm hitting the rook and hitting the knight. And so black wins a piece. So white can't take on e5. But white can take on c4, which is what white did. And now black played e4. Okay, so this has actually occurred a couple of times. But white's move here has actually never been played before. So in this position, what has been played before is actually a couple of things. Knight h4 is the most common response, just to kind of put the question to the bishop. And then what would happen is knight h4 attacking the bishop, and then if the bishop moves, the pawn would hang. So we have to move this bishop at a gain of time. So bishop e6, hitting the knight, and then knight e3. And it's kind of a weird position. This knight's misplaced, but this pawn is probably falling, so something like bishop e7, bishop e4, bishop h4, gh4 is possible. It's kind of an awkward position. Oops, sorry, gh4. Kind of a weird position. But Grishuk did not play knight h4. Another move that white could play is actually knight to g1. Counting on the fact that white actually, even though he's playing knight g1, has a lead in development, because black's wasted time playing, you know, d5, dc4, e5, and e4. And then maybe try to relocate the knight to h3 and f4, and try to attack this pawn on e4. Also, knight e3 is coming, potentially. So knight g1 is also possible. But Grishuk played the only other move that really makes sense here. He played knight f e5. Okay, so this looks a little dangerous because this knight now is actually trapped, right? Can't go anywhere. All these squares are protected. So what's white's idea? What's white's idea? Like, why can't I just try to win this knight? Like, why can't I go f6 or something? Because, you know, white's pieces look dangerous, but they also seem like they may be overextended. So what is the idea? So yeah, queen b3 doesn't work. Because I can just take this. I can just take on e5. If you take on b7, I just play knight d7. I'm just up a piece. You can take on c6, I play bishop c5. And okay, I mean you have a couple of pawns for the piece, but my development is much greater than yours, and I can actually use this to open f-file very nicely. I just want to play like rook c8. And this is fine. If you play knight takes e5, I'll play rook c8. So, no, you can't really do that. But white's ideas stem from the fact that this bishop is unprotected. So after a move like f6, white would actually play knight e3. And of course, if you take on e5, take on f5, this is excellent for white. These pawns are very weak. And so the bishop would have to move, say bishop e6. And now I vacated the c4 square for my knight, so I play knight 5 c4. And again, now my knights are more comfortable. I've kind of flip-flopped them. This knight has kind of moved here. And now I'm threatening to simply take on e4. And so if you play a move like f5, then all of a sudden your bishop becomes a little bit weak, and e5 again becomes a target, a hole for my knight. I can play moves like castle, queen c2, d3, or d1, try to break open the center. Because I'll have a massive lead in development, you know? If you play f5, it's going to take at least 3 moves to castle, whereas I can castle immediately. So that's white's idea, if black tries to punish it too quickly. So black just makes a natural move, queen to c7. White plays d4, supporting his knight on e5, because black was maybe threatening to play b5, kicking this knight and then trying to win this one. So d4 supports the knight. f6, now again trying to do that same idea, but knight e3, bishop e6, same thing. Knight 5 c4. And now this pawn is attacked, so f5. Okay. So now, white castles, always a good idea. Black plays knight f6, trying to complete his development. Okay, now guys, what do you guys think white should do here? This is kind of chess 101. What should white play here? So you have to kind of take the temperature of the position here and realize that white's lead in development is about to be neutralized if black can kind of get in, you know, bishop e7 and castles. Black has more space because he has that pawn on e4, but it also means that he's a bit more overextended. So natural developing moves like queen c2, bishop d2 really don't address the heart of the matter in the position, which is that white needs to kind of take advantage of the fact that that e4 pawn has kind of progressed down the board a bit too far, and that black's king is still trapped in the center for now. And the way to do that is to play the line opening f3, which is what Grishik played. So f3 is a very good move. because now we're trying to make this pawn on e4 isolated. So we're threatening to take. But not only does it make it isolated, it gives our bishop more scope, because it will be threatening a pawn, and also gives our rook more scope when we open up the file. So if you just kind of play a quiet developing move, black will, just play bishop e7 and castle. Bishop h3, I can just play g6, and g6 is not really a move I'm too unhappy playing. But f3. f3. So Grishik is white, Rothstein is black. And yeah, f3 is really the necessary move here. So he takes up the pawn, and now Grishik makes an odd decision. It makes some sense to take with a pawn to open up the e-file, and certainly white will make more use of that e-file than black, and also this pawn controls these two squares. It also makes sense to take with the bishop, because now, again, you're controlling these two squares with the bishop, has some scope on c6, and the rook is open. But he actually took with the rook. So it looks a little odd, but it comes with a gain of tempo, because now we're actually threatening this pawn on f5. Okay, we can't really take it immediately. Because this knight on c4 is hanging. But, we could like queen c2 maybe, and then threaten to take it. Right. Okay. So black decides to defend it. Anyway. And now the question is, what should white play here? What should white play here? This game was played today, so yeah, it was played literally 8 hours ago. Okay, so what do you guys think white should play here? Protect the knight or move it. Well, it's defended. It's defended by the pawn on e3. I mean, by the knight on e3. Did I say pawn? I meant to say knight. So it's defended. So we played f3 to kind of try to bust open the lines to the king and get our pieces more active. And okay, we've done a little bit of that. We've gotten our rook more active, we've gotten our bishop more active. But that pawn on f5 still seems to be a bit of an impediment to our plans. So we gotta take it to the next step. G4. G4, guys. So another reason why this move rook takes f3 was strong is that this rook actually acquires the third rank for potential roving. And so obviously pawn takes pawn is out of the question. Knight hangs. And if knight takes pawn, then after knight takes knight, pawn takes rook e3, all of a sudden the rook has gained this critical e3 square, and this king is feeling very unhappy. King f7 or king d7 is not really what you want to play. Knight e5 check is coming. And you don't really want to stay in this pin very long. So this is very strong. Now d5 is coming with great effect as well. So this is very good. And so if black can't really take on g4, well, now we're just starting to take on f5. So g4 is a class move. Okay, so black is desperately trying to keep this position closed. And there's really no way to defend this pawn, so he's got to push through. F4. F4. Alright. Well, now what? Well, now what? Well, now he's attacking our knight. And if we move the knight, the problem is our pawn on g4 is suddenly undefended. As well as the fact that our knight on c4 is also undefended. So this seems to kind of, you know, put a stop to our plans. It seems very dangerous for white now. So our pieces are a little loose. These knights defending each other is not the most secure of it's not the most secure setup. So after f4, what does white play? Well, pretty much only can do one thing here. Well, you can do a couple of things actually, but the best thing to do is to play the move g5. Yeah. So rook takes f4 is actually possible, by the way, but you have to be careful. Queen takes f4, knight d5 is the point. And I can actually play knight takes d5, bishop takes f4, and knight takes f4. So if you actually count the material in this position, I have 2 pieces and a rook for the queen. Now, to be fair, black's pieces aren't really developed completely yet. So white is probably still slightly better here, but this is dangerous, because if I can somehow get my pieces coordinated as black, you'll be in real trouble as white. Of course, it's very open, and the queen can be very strong in these positions, but you know, just because you won my queen doesn't mean you won material, because actually black is up material here, with a rook and 2 pieces for the queen. But it is playable. It is playable. But g5 I think is actually stronger. So the point is now if you take on e3, I'll just take on f6, and I'll just win this pawn. Actually, I'll take on e3 first. I'll take on e3 first, sorry, because now I'm threatening this and this. And then if you move your king to defend the bishop, I can throw in a knight check first to save the knight. So yeah. So yeah, because if I take the knight first, you can actually take here probably and be okay. But I take on e3 first, and now both pieces are hanging. And if you save the bishop, I remove my knight from capture, and then I take the knight. And this is very, very bad for black. So he can't really do that. So after g5, black moves his knight, knight h5, also defends the pawn. Also defends the pawn. Okay. So what now? Again, our knight's attacked, and again, if our knight moves, the knight hangs. So what now? Well, only one choice, really. Only one choice, really. You gotta save the material. But it required a lot of calculation. Not easy calculation either. So the only thing to really continue is to play d5. Now the idea again is if you take on e3, I can even take on e3 first. Because if you take, I'll take with the bishop. And then I can take on e6. Or I could actually just take on e6 right away. It's also probably very good. Probably very good. Yeah. So d5. So pawn takes pawn. And now what? Because now I'm threatening this knight, and I'm threatening this knight. So the question is what to do here. And now the game gets insane. Now it gets crazy. So what does white do here? White really only has one move at this point. Everything else loses instantly. Everything else loses instantly. White's kind of treading a very thin line. If queen a4 check, I just block, and you're still have the same problem. All your pieces are hanging. So that doesn't really work. Queen takes c5 is unfortunately not enough. But yeah, knight takes d5. Yep. Okay, so there's a couple of things to think about. So the first question to answer is, why isn't this hanging? Second question to answer is, does black have something better than that even? And the third question to answer is, what the heck is going on here? Yeah, not a person should really have a clue what's going on here. It just looks super messy, right? It just looks super messy. So why can't black play queen takes c4? And if you actually successfully know why black can't play queen takes c4, then you're a genius, because I'm not even sure that Grishuk knew entirely why black couldn't play queen takes c4. He just had an intuition about it. His intuition was correct. I'll give him that, but I can't imagine he saw this whole line that follows after queen takes c4. So okay, you guys have figured out the kind of obvious thing, which is queen takes c4, rook c3 actually traps the queen. Believe it or not. So let's look at every square the queen could possibly go to. So it can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. Can't go here because of the knight. Can't go here because of the queen. Okay, now the tricky ones are these two. It can't go to b5 or a6 because of knight c7 check. Fork. Actually forking the rook too. Okay, can't go back to these squares because of the rook. Can't go here because of the queen. Can't go here because of the bishop. Can't go here because of the queen, or actually the bishop. Can't go there because of the bishop. And if bishop takes d5, rook takes c4, bishop takes, and bishop takes b7, wins the rook. So the queen is trapped. But it's not so simple. It's not so simple. So do you guys see what black can play here? This is not so simple. So the only way to save the queen is to throw in this check.
Check.
So the idea of this check is that we want to give the queen d4. So now if king h1, we want to play queen d4. And then extricate the queen. That's the idea. So yeah, knight c7 is possible,
check.
King e7, you know, bishop d2. And yeah, you can win my rook, but the knight will be trapped and I'll probably get two pieces for rook, and my king is actually not terribly unsafe. Relatively speaking. So that's the idea. So, in order to stop that, white would have to play e3. So now the idea is we're taking away the d4 square. And again, we're threatening to win the queen. Okay. But, after f takes e3, now it's a problem because black has a threat of his own. And that threat is to play e2 check, winning the queen back. And by playing f takes e3, the queen has also gained the square h4. And also g4, by the way. Also g4. So all of a sudden it's tricky. All of a sudden it's tricky. So what's the best move here for white? So white has to meet the threat of e2 check. So knight c7 is correct, but it doesn't do anything close to mate, because I can just play king f7. I can just play king f7. And again, if you take on c4, I have e2. So what do you do here? So the point of playing knight c7 is not so much to mate, but it's actually to get this queen off of this square with a gain of tempo. So if black had instead played king e7, then I can take on e3. And after taking on e3, I can actually just play king h1. Rook to d8, queen e1, bishop d2, rook c4, bishop e1, rook e1. And the problem is this rook is hanging and this bishop is hanging. So right now I'm down the exchange. I'm down a piece. I'm down a piece. But I'm going to win a full rook. And maybe more, actually. Maybe more. Because actually I can do it this way, too. So I can actually exchange here and take the rook, yeah. So I'll win at least a rook, probably a rook and a pawn. So king f7. So the point of king f7 is now that there's no pin on the e-file. But this does allow a different thing, which is queen f3 check. So now I'm getting my queen out of this e2 check with check. So now, but this gives black the opportunity to save the queen. This gives black the opportunity to save the queen with rook f or queen f4. And after the sequence, rook takes c5, winning the piece back. Knight d7, getting this rook out of dodge with a gain of tempo, because I'm attacking this rook. Rook c3, queen takes f3, bishop takes f3, rook a c8. Bishop takes e3. If you look at the material, it's actually completely even. Knight, bishop, bishop, knight, knight, bishop. 2 rooks, 4 pawns, 2 rooks, 4 pawns. But the problem is, in this position, black's king is completely naked. These rooks are going to start coming to these files. These pawns are loose. And there's always these knight takes e6 ideas, bishop g4 check ideas. These bishops are going to start raking the board. So black is actually very close to lost here, even though the material is equal. And I'm not entirely sure that Grishuk saw this type of end position when he played knight takes d5. But, oh no. Okay, I have to go back, sorry. So if you guys missed the game, I'll show it to you again. So I pressed the wrong button. But, in any case, that whole entire variation was pretty insane, I thought. So let me go through it one more time for you guys. So g5, knight h5, d5, take. Okay, so again, queen takes c4, rook c3, bishop c5 check. Forced, e3 forced, f takes e3 forced, and now knight c7 check to bring the king to f7, queen f3 check to get the queen out of danger, Queen f4 to get your queen out of danger. Recapture material. Get the rook out with tempo. Trade queens. Oh, sorry. It's white's move. So yeah, remove the rook from danger. Trade queens. Move the rook from danger. And bishop takes pawn. And white is very close to winning this. So, the next question to ask is there something better than queen takes c4? Because that's kind of like the first thought. But okay, queen takes c4, rook c3 looks super dangerous at the very least. So is there something better? Is there something better? Turns out there is. Turns out there is. And the better move is actually play queen c5 check.
Check.
Now the idea is, okay, I'm attacking this knight, but I'm also attacking this knight. So how should white respond to this? How should white respond to this? It's not easy to see. Because the natural responses don't really work. For example, if rook f2, well, now the problem is your rook doesn't have c3 anymore, so I could just take on c4. Your bishop is defending d5, but I can take on c4. There's no rook c3. And after queen c5, if you play king h1, well, now I can take on d5. So how does white meet this? And if I play e3, well, now not only am I blocking my rook, but I'm blocking everything. I mean, there's no rook c3 anymore. I mean, I can take whatever I want. I can take this, take this. Probably taking this one is safer, just because don't want to allow knight c7s at any point. But yeah, this doesn't seem to work either. So what can white do? Yeah, so the only thing to do is to block on e3. The question is, do you block with this knight or do you block with this knight? And it turns out you block with the c knight. Keep this knight posted on its aggressive square. And we'll get to what happens when black takes this in a second, because that's actually what he played. But say black tries to just say, okay, let me just try to get my pieces out and play bishop g7. Well, white can at least play knight takes f4, knight takes f4, rook takes f4. And the material is white's up a pawn. And black cannot castle. Castling is illegal. This rook defends f8. And my bishop's hitting b7. So this is probably pretty okay for white, at the very least. You know, it's possible that white actually may have something stronger, like maybe b4, attack this queen, and try to lure it off of c7. Of course, this is a little bit more dangerous because this bishop is now attacking the rook, but at the very least, knight takes f4 is kind of like a safe way to be ahead. So, okay, well, if you can't do a safe move, what about just winning a piece? So f takes e3. So now the question is, what did white have in mind here? What did white have in mind here? Well, same idea, b4. So queen takes d5 doesn't work because I can move this rook with check. So queen takes d5, I can play rook takes f8 check.
Check.
And then take on d5. So the queen is very limited on where it can go. Basically needs to stay someplace where it guards c7. So really the only choices are like d6 or c8. So black played the best move, which is queen to d6. So he's still down, he's still up a piece. But now after rook takes e3, all of a sudden white is threatening rook takes e6, queen takes e6, knight c7, winning the queen. And it's difficult to defend that. White also has ideas to play bishop b2. and all of white's pieces are kind of pouring into black's position. So probably best here was actually to get this king out of the pin with king to d8. And bishop b2 and knight d7. Just sacrifice this rook just to get your pieces out. Because if you move the rook, say you play rook g8, well, now I have bishop e5, and now this king is very close to being mated. This queen is not finding many squares. And these rooks and this queen kind of make a mincemeat out of black's king. So this is really not working. But you probably sacrifice the rook and you retain some chances because you're only down the exchange. And maybe you can survive. But after this, black played knight a6. And now it's just kind of getting all your pieces into the attack. So bishop e2, similar idea with bishop e7, bishop e5 ideas. Believe it or not, black's best move is probably actually to castle here. Castling is legal. And then after rook c1, check. King b8 to just lose his queen with bishop e5. And of course this is pretty much over. But it's better than what he played, which is bishop g7, trying to just maintain his piece up. Okay, now white to move and win. Do you guys see it? Do you guys see it? So rook takes c6 doesn't work because the knight defends c7. So there's no knight c7 check. But yeah, the right answer is actually knight f6 check.
Check.
And then after king e7, what do you play? Because king e7 to defend the queen. Now what? So it's actually mate in 25 here. And it's surprising you actually trade queens.
Check.
And you play rook d1 check.
Check.
This is actually mate in 25. If you play king c7, only really two moves here, king c7 or king e7. King c7, it's mate in 9. Rook takes e6, bishop takes f6, g takes f6, king b8, bishop b5 check, knight c7, rook e7, knight takes f6, bishop takes c7,
check,
king c8, bishop f4, knight d7, rook takes d7, or sorry, knight d5 actually, rook takes d5, g5, bishop h3,
check,
g4,
checkmate.
take. So I was mate in 9, right? Yeah. So let's mate in 9. And then if you go king e7, which is the better move, it's mate in 24. With rook d7 check.
Check.
king f8, rook takes e6, take, 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 take,
check,
king e8, rook takes b7. Okay, well at the very least you have 2 pawns here, but this is actually going to be a forced mate. These 2 rooks are super strong. You're going to have like bishop c6, rook d7, that type of thing. So yeah, after bishop g7, white played knight f6 and black just resigned. Because he saw he was going to lose this piece and his king is dead and his pieces are dead. So the key is just after king e7 just to take,
check,
and play check, and play check.
check,
And this is pinned. So you have to go king f8 and then just take, and this is kind of hopeless. So anyway, kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. So yeah, if you take on g7 first, instead of knight f6 right away, the problem is after take, knight f6,
check,
king e7,
check,
take, it's not really quite as good. Not really quite as good. I mean, it's still good.
check.
But now I can actually go king c7. There's no bishop e5 anymore. So I can actually run this way. And you're still completely winning, but I can actually run this way now. So it makes it a little bit worse. Yeah. So, I mean, Black resigned. He had seen enough. So very, very forceful and dynamic play from Grishuk that game.